We are back with a little bit of NBA coverage. This is going to be my first go at this for the season so far. And while I would have gone through a general review of how every team is doing to this point of the season, every game that I've watched for the past week or so has related to the NBA Cup tournament. And it started back with the knockout round matches last Tuesday. So I figured I may as well cover all of those here. So we're going to go back to the Magic vs. Bucks last Tuesday, where after Milwaukee took a 7-6 lead off of a Giannis Antetokounmpo dunk, of course, the Magic would take full control of the game by the end of the first quarter with help from their role players like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Goga Bitadze got a few shots to go in, and Tristan da Silva was also getting involved very much. Of course, you have to find different guys to step up here because you're missing Franz Wagner at this point. You're missing Paolo Banchero still. So you need to figure out who's going to be that secondary or tertiary option for you at times. Even Jet Howard was able to make a three-point shot for the Magic just before the quarter ended. Now Bobby Portis would respond, and that would lead to a change of fortune for the Bucks in the second quarter, as there would start to be a shift. They were just trading buckets back and forth between Morris Wagner and also Bobby Portis Jr. Then, at a point with Damian Lillard and Brook Lopez getting involved a little more, you have the Bucks ultimately usurping the Magic by the halfway point of the second quarter. And still, it was a fight to the very end of the first half. The Magic would retake the lead with a Jalen Suggs three before Giannis would respond with another layup on his end. And then Anthony Black would manage to get an and one, with Goga Bitadze also taking the lead up to 6 off of a dunk of his. And the Bucks would storm back on a 6-0 run to take a 1-point lead at the end of a very competitive first half. Now, in the third quarter, there were not a lot of shots made on either side. Just 33 combined points between both teams. But over the course of this time, you have Giannis Antetokounmpo just getting straight on Goga Bitadze's ass, because earlier in the game, Bitadze actually managed to posterize Giannis for some reason. Now, Giannis Antetokounmpo then got his ass back. And then, over the course of the quarter, he called out Bobby Portis and said he wanted the assignment on Goga Bitadze so he could lock his ass up. Now, Bitadze would get a bucket off of a layup in this quarter, and Jalen Suggs would also make another three to take the lead back up to 6. But even with Suggs honestly having a pretty solid performance to this point, the Bucks were not going to relent on their end, and they would start getting some three-point shots to fall to give them some momentum. Ultimately, after a Gary Trent 3 opened the game up to 8 points, the teams would trade just a couple more buckets, with the Magic getting a layup from Anthony Black to keep the game at an 8-point deficit going into the fourth quarter. If defense was at a premium in the third, that was far from the case in the fourth. You would have offenses on full display, and I mean full display. Jet Howard, once again, asserting himself as a solid contributor. Nothing too crazy for the Magic, but enough for them to last. Cut the game down to 3. Got Bobby Portis Jr. making shots, and then all of a sudden you get a Brook Lopez posterizer on the Magic defense. As if, yes, as old as he is, he's very old, but he still has some athleticism, and obviously his height helps as well. Negin Bitadze would respond with a dunk of his own, ironically enough. I don't know why they feel. I've been hearing from some people that they would be trying to trade the Magic, Wendell Carter Jr., and retain Goga Bitadze for some reason. I mean, he had some solid plays made in this game, but I still just can't find myself taking that too seriously. I'm not gonna lie. AJ Green is a very interesting case when looking at this Bucks team. Quite literally, this dude just came out of nowhere last season, and they decided to give him another chance this season, and he has been a surprising contributor for them. It is just interesting on a team that has Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo whenever he is on the court. I'm telling you, they just give him the green light, and it does not stop. He makes this three-pointer over Moritz Wagner, and then manages to block Anthony Black's shot as well, hitting another one later in the quarter after a Jalen Suggs layup. Even with the contributions that AJ Green had, this man, Jalen Suggs, would tie the ball game at 100 after making a three of his own. And this fourth quarter, in which the Magic would actually take the lead on numerous occasions with the help of Jalen Suggs, was a good one on the path to a career-high night for him, as he not only went on a 10-0 personal run for them up until Wendell Carter made his free throws, he also had 18 fourth quarter points to give him 32 on the night. While he may not always be this way on the offensive end, he certainly has the capability to get there, and that is why he is getting the contract extension that he signed prior to the start of the season. Well deserving of it. There's also no way. He got Gary Trent Jr., who, again, by this point was supposed to be a pretty solid two-way presence, especially judging from his years in Portland and, I guess, the very early portion of his tenure in Toronto. Whatever has happened to him since then, I don't know, but it just hasn't panned out. And he got exposed completely. Like, he was able, Jalen Suggs, to just cross him right up and get right into the shot he wanted. Now, Damian Lillard would end up getting the three to tie it, and then the dunk. He's still got his athleticism too. He's always had that ability, but hasn't necessarily needed to rely on it as much as one would want. He, with his free throws, would eventually get the game sealed up. Just for security, Giannis would make his, and then Damian Lillard would continue to cap things off for them, giving the Bucks the 114-109 win to help them advance to the semifinal round. As I mentioned, Jalen Suggs had 32 points and 9 rebounds in this one, adding 4 steals as well. He did miss a barrage of jump shots at the very tail end of the fourth quarter, but I understood completely why they gave him those shots, to be completely honest with you. He was on one, and he was one of the only players on that court out there making shit happen. You had to entrust him with those shots. That was your best chance. Anthony Black would contribute 17 points of his own off the bench, with Moritz Wagner also adding 13 off the bench. Bitadze, again, some solid buckets here and there, but 6 of 13 shooting for 12 points. He did manage to get a double-double with 14 rebounds, though. Jett Howard would add 10 points off the bench, making 2 threes as well. Cole Anthony has been kind of an issue for them this season. I'm not going to lie to you. He has kind of lost his role on the offensive end. I'm not going to lie. He has been a six man for them for the longest period of time. And now it seems as though he's just become a little more ineffective, I should say. I mean, you look at a man that's averaging just 5 points, 2 rebounds, and 2 assists off the bench as his minutes continue to decrease on a nightly basis. In this game, he only managed to get 4 points, shooting 2 of 12 from the field. Now, again, the game was close overall, so I'm not here to say that he's the exact reason why they lost the game. What I am telling you is that that's glaring. That is highly glaring. And I don't know if another team would be willing to take that on at all. It's like, dude, what kind of contribution is that? Real talk. I have no idea what their plans are for him. Like, it's so strange for him right now. Like, just 11 minutes per game. Again, he has not been a starter. I get that part, but this is on pace to be his worst season by far. He's only making 38% of his shots, which would be his worst mark since his 21 season with them. And he would also have his worst efficiency from beyond the arc to this point with just a paltry 30.8% shooting. By far the worst in his career. He's always been around league average, but when you're just going to shoot below average that consistently, you're just hurting the team. He has not been efficient at the line, and he's also, again, yes, less minutes played, but he seems to have lost a little bit of his ability to draw fouls as well. I mean, he drops down to just a little under a single free throw made per game this season when he had more than double that the season prior. So they have something to figure out there completely, but would have to, honestly, they would have the time. I mean, you're out of the in-season tournament now, so you've got all the time in the world to make something happen. Moving on to the Mavericks and Thunder game. In this game right here, absolutely pissed me the fuck off. Now, it was competitive for a good portion of time, as Luguentz Dort would actually be able to get the first shot on the board in terms of when they switched the broadcast, because the Bucks Magic game took so long that they would have to delay the broadcasting of the Mavericks Thunder game for just a little bit. Now, it was playing in the background and there was scoring, but that Luguentz Dort 3 would give them the lead. And this would become a theme of the night for the game as a whole. I mean, coming into this, the Thunder had not necessarily been one of the most prolific teams and efficient teams in terms of shooting the three-pointer. But the Mavericks defense all night long just continued to give up the open shot, failing to get their rotations to the shooter in time to deter them from making their shots. And it absolutely killed them over the course of this game. Now, Klay Thompson would have a few things to say about that. And again, Luka Doncic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, two of the better players in the league, if you didn't already know, would trade some buckets here and there. But after a very slow burn in the first quarter, the Thunder would continue to try and pull away. Now, again, it wasn't all lost for the Mavericks. Despite them making some pretty errant passes and just getting into situations where they produce stupid ass turnover after stupid ass turnover to aid the Thunder even more. But with the help of guys like Olivier Maxence Prosper, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Daniel Gafford, the game was kept relatively close for just enough time. You would have the role players for the Mavericks and Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes doing their best efforts to step up whenever Kyrie Irving or Luka Doncic weren't hitting their shots. And after Isaiah Hartenstein ended up opening up the game to an 8-point deficit, 55-47 lead, the Mavericks would begin to take a little bit of control. You would have a Najee Marshall layup and then a Klay Thompson 3. Now all of a sudden you've got a 5-point ball game and a few shots would be attempted by both teams before the half would be done. Shit got real bad in the third quarter. The Thunder would win it by a 14-point margin. Start out with an Isaiah Hartenstein layup, and then you would have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just getting completely active in his own element. Lucius Dort would get involved, and then the three-pointers started raining down. You got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander hitting one. You got Cason Wallace hitting one. You got Jalen Williams hitting very tough buckets, and Isaiah Hartenstein getting put back dunks. Now, again, Mavericks, to their credit, they would respond with buckets. But it was almost as if they were trying their hardest to outpace the Thunder without putting in enough effort from both sides. You're going to try to play this back and forth scoring game with them. You're not going to win the game because you can't get out in place to guard the open shot. And you're giving it up that consistently. Like, ultimately, those buckets don't mean anything if you aren't going to play some brand of defense. But the wackiest shit of all would happen. You would have Isaiah Joe hit a three-point shot to open up the game, 87-72. And then at the very end of the quarter, you would have Isaiah Joe hit a wild-ass buzzer beater. At that point, the game was done. He literally got the ball off of a long rebound, which is also an issue because there were multiple Mavericks in the vicinity of that ball, and they allowed them to pick up the rebound with Alex Caruso, dish it out to Isaiah Joe as quickly as possible, and this man, Isaiah Joe, double clutched into an open look that could have easily been a miss. But the Thunder were just on the ball all night long. The fourth quarter saw the Mavericks try their best to play catch-up ball, but it seriously did not matter. Like, they had just a sliver of a chance, and it just withered away completely. There would be a stretch where they got the game down to an 8-point deficit, but the Thunder were right back to their ways, and the Mavericks could absolutely do nothing about it. As the Thunder would win the match 118-104. You can be fooled by the Mavericks having 5 less threes than the Thunder, but I kid you not. A good percentage of those 23-pointers were open shots. And the Mavericks could not necessarily get these buckets when it was a competitive match. A good portion of those came in garbage time. But also, when you look at the fact that they had 8 more rebounds, including 10 more offensive rebounds, they got more chances on offensive possessions, taking 21 more shots from the field, despite being a little less effective. It also helped that the Mavericks were so sloppy, and again, that lack of transition defense and solid enough rotations led to 36 points off of turnovers compared to the Mavericks' 17. That was ultimately the difference in this game, along with the barrage of three-point shots when it counted. Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic would have relatively quiet nights from the field, combining for just 33 points, 13 rebounds, and 10 assists as a unit, and being relatively ineffective from the field also, just 12 of 29 shooting as a duo. It was Klay Thompson and Najee Marshall doing their best efforts to keep them in the game. They both made 50% or more of their shots and produced 19 points in their respective roles. As for the Thunder, Shea would put up 39 points and 8 rebounds with 5 assists and 3 blocks in this game on 15 to 23 shooting. Jalen Williams would add a solid 18, 7, and 4, with Isaiah Hartenstein producing a double-double with 10 points and 13 rebounds. And all of these other players here, again, they didn't need to do a whole bunch of anything. They just needed to hit the shots, and they certainly got that job done. We move on to the Wednesday action, and we start out with the Hawks and Knicks, the rematch of the 2021 first round action that saw Trae Young just completely fuck New York up and make all the Knicks fans hate him. It's safe to say that by the end of this night, that sentiment was going to stand. That was not going to change. Now, Mikal Bridges would get the scoring started for the Knicks, and they would start off. The Knicks would start off pretty hot in this game, getting the lead up to 13-4 before Dyson Daniels would activate just a little bit of routine offensive play. You know, the man's not necessarily a shooter or anything like that, but he'll get you a layup every now and then when you need one. They would go back and forth for a little bit as Trae Young would start to see himself get a little more involved, and that certainly would become important just a little later on. But I have to focus my attention on the likes of Jalen Johnson and, I guess, Onyeka Okongwu. Jalen Johnson has been an absolute... He's been that dude. They thought that by losing John Collins, they were going to be in trouble for just a little bit. But credit to them, because Jalen Johnson has truly come into his own to start out this season. And, I mean, prior to it, they have faith that he could do just that, as they gave him a contract extension before the start of the season. It is safe to say that it has paid off for them, as he is quite literally on pace to average a damn near 20-point double-double, to add 5 assists as well, which is not something that John Collins was as proficient at when it comes to playmaking. It just adds another element there. And that, again, that will certainly become important just a little bit later on in this game. For now, though, the Knicks as a whole were still trying to impose their role in the defensive end against the Hawks. Bogdanovic and Zachary Zalshay would break through for a couple of contributions. This is where we have to talk about Karl-Anthony Towns just being an absolute cone. That dunk maybe it wasn't a poster, but the fact that Zachary Rizalshe was able to get up on Karl Anthony Towns in the first place and at least roll it in all the way over him, just absolutely atrocious. And he wasn't the only one, Rizalshe, that would get a posterizer of some kind on Karl Anthony Towns. Almost every single starter on that Hawks roster, even some of the bench guys, like literally, I can tell you that Jalen Johnson would get one on Karl Anthony Towns. Dyson Daniels would get one on Karl Anthony Towns. DeAndre Hunter would get one on Karl Anthony Towns. Still, though, we're just not supposed to make that pay that any mind, because Karl Anthony Towns can shoot the ball very proficiently and can be one of the better offensive threats in the league. It's more than, you have to have more than that sometimes. Seriously. Now, the Knicks would end up taking a 54-47 lead at the end of the first half. And the third quarter would see them continue a good amount of work, as after a few Jalen Johnson buckets and a trade-off between Karl Anthony Towns' three and Mikal Bridges' jump shot from the mid-range, the Knicks would have a 62-52 lead with 9 minutes and 50 seconds left in the quarter. Trae Young would start one of the better runs from a single team over the course of an entire half this season. You could argue that it was competitive, but it was all Hawks from this point on. Not necessarily spoiling anything else, but the Hawks would go on a 56-38 run to close out this game, completely overtaking the control of this game from the Knicks side, as defense on the part of Dyson Daniels and Jalen Johnson came well into form. They were jumping passing lanes, they were getting gritty steals up on their men, and they were blocking a decent amount of shots, if I do say so myself. Trae Young would start to come alive as well, hitting a three to get the game within one and then take the lead subsequently on the next possession before getting a few free throws to have a 7-0 personal run right there. DeAndre Hunter would also make a three, and the Knicks would have a little response before Onyeka Okongwu and Bogdan Bogdanovic continued to apply pressure. By the end of it, the Hawks would be up 81-72 at the end of this quarter. We enter the fourth, and it's more of the same for the Hawks here. The Knicks would try their hardest to make sure that they could come back, and for a while there, it very much seemed like it could happen. Now, Josh Hart is in some pretty unique territory. Josh Hart would make this three here, but the most telling part of his game this season has been his work in the restricted area. He has the third highest efficiency from the field in the 2-point range. He is just over 70% shooting in that aspect. And Brent Barry's 2001 season in the NBA was the most accurate season for a guard shooting as many 2-pointers as he is to this point. Brent Barry had the highest rate, and it remains. But if Josh Hart does enough work and he manages to maintain that level of proficiency from this range, he could overtake Brent Barry there. So I would keep that in mind. And it continued there, albeit in garbage time, as he would get a layup and one. All the Hawks had to do was close it out, and they did just that, winning the game 108-100, as Trae Young would signal his, travel in pursuit of Vegas by rolling some dice on the Knicks court. That certainly got Knicks fans pissed off, but the way I see it, you had to play better overall in the game. Again, a 9 rebound difference overall and 10 overall rebound difference in terms of offensive boards. You allowed more points on the fast break and 12 more points in the paint overall. But also, they couldn't shoot a lick in this game. They would go 11-42 overall from the field, which is just absolutely atrocious. And it's not like the Hawks did any better, right? They only made 29% of their threes. But the amount of threes that they missed on that overall run, with the Hawks taking that 18-point margin over the ensuing 21 minutes of the game, they shot themselves out of it. They shot themselves out of it. Like, quite literally. There's almost no other way to describe that. It is not to say that they didn't have a chance, but, like, take OG Anunoby, for example, going 1 of 9 shooting from the field and going 5 of 17 overall. Jalen Brunson also went just 5 of 15 from the field. You get any pair of players doing that in an 8-point ball game, those shots could have truly made a difference. Now, Karl-Anthony Towns would still have 19 points and 19 boards. Josh Hart adding 21 points in this game himself. Mikal Bridges getting 19. But even he shot 1 of 5 from the 3-point line. As for Trae Young, as ineffective as 22 points on 22 shots seems, and granted, it's certainly the case, he did add 11 assists, which he leads the league in assists. Is that really surprising to anybody? I wouldn't assume that it is. Jalen Johnson would add 21 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists in another very good game for him. DeAndre Hunter would have 24 points as a 6th man off the bench on 8 of 15 shooting in this game. And Onyeka Okongwu, which again, I think they need to start him over Clint Capella. It's time. It's time, man. He would have a 12-point, 11-rebound double-double in 23 minutes of play. Now we go back as well to last Wednesday for the other match, the Warriors and Rockets. Now I will state that I watched the first half. Coming into this game, the Warriors had 15 straight wins against the Rockets dating back to February of 2020. That would unfortunately be broken here, but not without some controversy. I mean, you would have the Warriors offense, and the Rockets offense for that matter, be inept for just a little while. The scoring in this game overall was just slow. Just a 20-18 first quarter between the two teams. And it didn't fare too much better in the second quarter, but when it came down to it, the Rockets played good enough defense to stave off the likes of Stephen Curry, Lindy Waters, and Buddy Hield from being able to make as many shots as they would believe that they could hit to this point. They were also cleaning the glass completely. For example, an Amen Thompson rebound led to a dunk by him, and they continued to control overall possession of the ball. So it made the job of the Warriors even harder in terms of trying to respond if they can't even pick up the ball in the first place. Missing the third and fourth quarter action, and yet again, the battle continued to have this sort of magnitude. It was just a back and forth defensive battle between both teams that would see the Warriors take just a 1-point lead at the end of this quarter. In the fourth, with a highly competitive spirit, this is where things would get controversial. A penalty was called on Jonathan Kuminga that would completely change the outlook of the game here. There were only a few seconds left, and possession would have been given to the Warriors if they managed to get that call. But refs just weren't having it, and they elected to let the game play on, allowing Jalen Green to get to the line and seal the deal, 91-90, allowing them to advance. Now, Jonathan Kuminga would have 20 points in this game, but not necessarily the most effective shooting if it takes you 20 shots to get there. Stephen Curry would have 19 points. Hield would add 15. And I don't know. The Warriors would just be eliminated. Steve Kerr definitely had a lot of things to say about their elimination. He was not a happy camper about it. As for the Rockets, they would advance to the semifinal round with Alperen Sengun putting up 26 points and 11 boards in this game. You can also have Amen Thompson put up 10 off the bench. Y'all gonna keep trying to convince me to this man Jalen Green, dude. Listen, bro. It stated that he actually came into this game making about half of his shots. But let me tell you this, bro. This man put up 12 points on 5 of 15 shooting in this ballgame. Like, over the stretch of a few games, he had shot better than a little around 50% from the field coming into this. But the streak continues. I mean, just look at... He was given a contract extension before the beginning of the season, along with Alperen Sengun, which, again, I would have outlined these contract extensions if I had gotten around to making an earlier video on these, but that's mea culpa. In essence, though, a man that is putting up 19 points per game in a season where if you're getting paid like that, you're probably being expected to take that next step in some fashion. Now, it's not to say that that can't change for him. I mean, granted, it happened over the second half of the last season for him, which is why they committed to him for a little more time. But 19 points on 39.5% shooting from the field, and by far his worst three-point shooting season, though he's never necessarily been that proficient from there either, and that was one of the knocks against him when he was coming into the NBA from the G League Ignite in 2021. He has always had efficiency issues. And everybody wants to state that he has the potential. The potential's there for him to become an elite talent. I'm like, okay, he could be an elite talent potentially, but those efficiency problems are akin to Kevin Porter Jr., are akin to in a James Harden. It's one and the same. And you have him dealing with this struggle, and he seems to be playing his natural shooting guard position. You have a true point guard in Fred VanVleet taking off that kind of pressure. A veteran of the game and a pretty good passer at this point, taking that pressure off of you. Your main job at this point would be to score. And it just doesn't happen. Like, again, it's not that he can't do it, but something's got to give at some point. Because now the ball is in your court. You're being compensated for your potential. You have to go out there and truly show them what you're capable of. Now, for him, he would have a chance to do it on last Saturday, against the Thunder in the NBA Cup semifinal. This one was going to come down to defense as well. In a game that saw neither team be particularly proficient from the three-point line, they were two of the top 3 teams in defensive rating. So, surely enough, to start out this game, you had quite the defensive battle. Neither team could hit a shot to save their lives. Like, everything was being thrown up by both squads, and they just could not make anything. If anything, only a few buckets would be given to them. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would steal a few, and even Steven Adams would get a few buckets here and there. It's good to see that Steven Adams is playing basketball again. But in this game, again, similar 20-18 first quarter for the Rockets yet again, but they were on top. There would be back and forth physicality overall between both of these teams. You would have Tari Eason making a three-pointer before A.J. Mitchell gets things going. This man, Dillon Brooks, does all this shit-talking whenever he makes a three-point shot. And this game literally displayed why he just shouldn't be doing all of that. Like, you're going to give him that shot, and he's going to expect to think that he's really him. Like, okay. So keep on giving him the green light. What does he do? He continues to brick and pile up bricks. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would catch Dillon Brooks off guard, though, and absolutely fuck his ass up, draw the foul, get a bucket in. Jalen Green would actually manage to hit a shot that would help them get a bit further ahead in this game. And Amen Thompson will also add another bucket. That would eventually give them the 1-point lead, taking it into halftime. We get to the start of the third quarter, where there would be a few buckets traded between both teams, as the Rockets, with a Jalen Green 3, would eventually take a 48-45 lead. You would then see the Thunder go on a 19-7 run with the help of the core guys, completely overtaking this game in a sense. It was still within arm's length for the Rockets. Brooks and Thompson make sure of that. However, with more contributions from Hartenstein and SGA, they would ultimately take a 6-point lead getting into the fourth quarter, and things got bad for the Rockets here. With a chance to take themselves to represent the Western Conference in the NBA Cup, they allowed the Thunder to have another late surge overall. Alperen Sengun would hit just a few shots, but overall on this night, he seemed to struggle. He would have errant passes. He would not put enough arc on his shots and miss some gimme buckets that he's very capable of making. Quite the turnaround for him after a solid game in the semifinal. Jabari Smith would even try to just chuck randomness up. Like, this man, for whatever reason, decided to go right at Isaiah Hartenstein, and it would eventually be a foul. But he blocked the hell out of him. I don't know what Isaiah Hartenstein was thinking about, or what Jabari Smith was thinking about trying to test him like that. But, okay. But Jabari Smith Jr. would eventually try his absolute hardest to get him back, which makes sense. You don't want to see yourself going out like that. Most fitting way for this game then was with 2 Shai Gilgeous-Alexander free throws, and that's exactly what happened as the Thunder would take it 111-96 and secure a spot in the NBA Cup final. Again, Alperen Sengun only mustered 13 points and 11 rebounds in this game, but on a very underwhelming 6 of 16 shooting for him. Dillon Brooks, again, he's gonna start to do all this shit talking after he makes 1 3. This man proceeds to go 4 of 13 from 3 and shoot 5 of 17 from the field overall for just 14 points. So, any point that a trash-ass nigga like Dillon Brooks is taking almost as many 3-pointers as he has had made points. Okay. He's really a very capable player. The struggles continued for Jalen Green, who in this one went 1 of 8 shooting from 3. Had 12 points and shot 5 of 14 overall from the field. Fred VanVleet also went 3 of 15 from the field. Again, any team that's not going to make more than 25% of their threes is normally going to lose the game. And they were on a cold streak. They had missed several shots in a row on multiple occasions. They went on streaks of missing 8 at certain points, got up to 10 on a few occasions. They could not buy buckets. The Thunder had less overall shots from the field, but it seemed like they were able to get a few buckets when it counted. It did also help that they had 7 more free throw attempts and 13 more free throw makes. They also did a decent job of protecting the ball and not giving up too many points off of turnovers. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in this one had 32 points, 8 of 21 shooting, sure, but 14 of 15 from the line. That's what he does. Hartenstein would actually put up a career high 21 points, which I did not know was a career high for him. I would have thought that he had just a little more to this point, but no. Jalen Williams would add 20, and Luguentz Dort, for whatever reason, would have 19 points to give them in this one. I would have talked about it earlier, but we will get into the Hawks and Bucks now. A rematch of the 21 Eastern Conference final matchup. So tensions were definitely going to be a bit higher here. For whatever reason, it is stated that Taurean Prince, and as of the time of this video, he still does, lead the league in three-point percentage. Nobody seems to get the understanding yet that you probably shouldn't leave a man like that wide open. I guess he didn't have the most optimal night, but still. You're just giving him these open shots to work with. Eventually, he's going to hit a couple that completely change the momentum of a game. Giannis would get deep into his bag almost immediately, getting buckets like he usually does, playmaking to his teammates off the rip, just getting downhill and completely imposing his will on the defense. Despite them trying their absolute hardest to throw different bodies at Giannis, by the way. They would have Jalen Johnson on him for a little bit. They would have Dyson Daniels get in and try to handle the assignment. They would have Clint Capella try to handle the assignment. And while all of them were able to get the better of him on just a few occasions, it still wasn't enough. And he would exact that revenge as he would block Onyeka Okongwu. It is crazy. It is absolute madness. Now, Trae Young would help them get the lead back and control. Just a brief semblance of control would be taken by the Hawks. Ultimately, that would be enough, with the help of Jalen Johnson as well, to give them a 2-point lead over the Bucks entering the second quarter. Easily won by the Bucks, despite a bit of competitive spirit from the Hawks here. You would have Jalen Johnson continuing to be a massive contributor for the Hawks. But Brook Lopez and Giannis wanted to do a lot more than just contribute. They were on a mission to continue their ascent back into the top of the Eastern Conference after being in shambles for the early part of this season. They weren't going to let the Hawks stand in their way of glory. But the Hawks are not a team at this current point who are just going to stand down. Clearly, from their last game against the Knicks, they're going to go out and they're going to take whatever they want. That's what this third quarter was all about, quite frankly. You would have the Bucks getting into their usual brand of scoring and defense. But the Hawks had the perfect response for it over the course of this game. Onyeka Okongwu would eventually tie the game up. And then Jalen Johnson would get a few shots in, giving them the lead with another layup to end this third quarter. You may be noticing a little bit of a pattern here. This is the second time this happened. So naturally, what is expected to happen here? I guess what people optimally wanted to happen here. Now, through and through, again, got to credit the Hawks. Bucks are a very sound team at this current point. Now, there was a lot of turmoil going on earlier in the season, but they are very formidable. For them to give them a run for their money like this should be accounted for. You can't disrespect that. They went all the way with it. It was a 5-point ball game for most of this period of clutch time, but Damian Lillard would ultimately hit what would be the game-sealing shot. And a few free throws would be traded between both teams before a couple Clint Capella misses ended the game and gave the Bucks a 110-102 victory, allowing them to represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Cup Final. As Giannis would get a 32-point, near double-double with 14 rebounds and 9 assists. Damian Lillard would add 25, and Brook Lopez would actually get 16 points as well, all on relatively solid shooting from the field. Again, Gary Trent Jr. also, man, just 0 of 5 shooting in this game, only a single point. I just don't know. Like, he was on such an ascent in Portland, and Toronto endowed all of that capital to him, thinking he was going to continue that trend. Because the way things started out, it seemed like that's how it would be. Instead, this is happening to him in 2024. I don't know where exactly things changed, but it's not looking the best. All of that takes us into the NBA Cup Final yesterday between the Bucks and the Thunder. Now, the 3-point shooting was going to determine who would win this game, but also the ability for them to play defense on both sides. You have formidable weapons on that end from the Bucks and the Thunder. Like, people have said that the Thunder have a roster full of defenders at times on the court. And we know what Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo are capable of on that back end. You can also give credit to Taurean Prince as well, who has proven to be a solid defender whenever he chooses to lock in, creating for a highly formidable front court. So, when things came down to it, that is where the game would be won. And it certainly felt that way to open up the game, but things started out in a little bit of a different light. There would obviously be defense made, but you would have Isaiah Hartenstein and Giannis Antetokounmpo trading different buckets ad nauseum to open up this game right here. Now, with just a little bit, and I mean just a little bit, because the Isaiah Joe step back jumper for a 3 would give the Thunder a 16-9 lead with 7 minutes and 31 seconds left to go. Now, do you want to know why that is so significant? It is quite literally the only 3-point shot they would hit in this period, in the half, actually, as well. Still, with a few solid plays being made by the likes of Lucius Dort, for example, turning around Brook Lopez with a football move and making a fadeaway jumper over him before fouling out of the game because he had 2 fouls at that point. They were able to stave off the Bucks for just a little bit of time. You have SGA with signature shots, as while he would go ahead and get a 3-point jumper of his own, the Bucks would have a response. Still, they were down by just 1 point. It could have been 3 because Alex Caruso had hit a buzzer beater to cap off the first quarter, but under further review, they overturned the call, I guess, because it had only just gotten out of his hands at the 0-second mark. And with that, it took too long for the ball to travel to the basket and get in before the buzzer sounded off. So it was waved off, and the Bucks would open up the scoring in the second quarter with some action from Damian Lillard. Who else? AJ Green continuing to get that green light. There's literally all the time. It just never fails. Now, Kenrich Williams eventually turned the ball over as he would try, for whatever reason, to test Brook Lopez in the paint. I get that he's a little older and is not necessarily able to move as adeptly as he once was, but he's still a very capable defender. The fact that that happened was just absolutely shocking to me. You would have even more work being done by the Bucks to try and keep pace, both defensively and offensively. And ultimately, they would seize control of this quarter, taking just a 1-point lead into halftime. We get into the third quarter, and this is where things really began to change, as the Thunder will begin to shoot themselves out of the game. Interestingly enough, now you would have the likes of Isaiah Hartenstein, for example, getting wrapped up in a situation with Andre Jackson Jr. in the battle for double number supremacy, as he was trying to foul SGA of the possession after. Hartenstein would take a little finger and point it at him. Andre Jackson took exception to that and wanted to send a message, and he sent one indeed. That just drove the point home, really. The Bucks from there were just able to take things over completely. They kept shooting. I mean, the three-pointers, they kept firing them, and they were missing. At a certain point, too, SGA had as many three-pointers made by himself as the rest of the team had, and they shot an overall 2 of 20 from the three-point line outside of Shea. So when he's the one that is the most effective at doing that, I don't necessarily know how optimal that is for you. And I mean markedly better at shooting at this point. Like, it's not to say that he was leading them in three-pointers and other role players were on par with that in some level. No. Rest of them shot a combined 10% from the three-point line, and they wouldn't stop shooting. So naturally, with a 13-point lead to cap off this third quarter, which was contributed to with a Gary Trent three-pointer, ironically enough, it would just continue to get worse from here, as Gary Trent Jr. would actually make another one to open up the fourth quarter. Brook Lopez started to bang in shots from deep range that I didn't even know he still possessed. While Isaiah Joe wanted to put one on the board, by that point, any efforts to try and get themselves in the game with shooting was really too late. You would have Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein and Kenrich Williams over the course of the next few minutes all get blocked by Giannis Antetokounmpo with relative ease. They would put the second teamers in, and ultimately, after a made three-pointer by Kenrich Williams to cut the game down to 16 points, the Bucks would win it 97-81, becoming the 2024 NBA Cup champions. Giannis would obviously get the NBA Cup MVP, as he would have a 26-point, 19 rebound, and 10 assist game with 10 of 19 shooting from the field. Damian Lillard would add a solid 23 alongside him on 6 of 12 shooting, and Brook Lopez would have 13 points with 3 threes made, and solid contributions on defense as well, even though those numbers won't reflect in the stat sheet. Gary Trent Jr., mainly in garbage time, did have 13 points this time, which is a little bit of a turnaround. But you would like to see him ramp up that production when it actually matters. Because if he can do that, the Bucks could really make something out of this. It's a solid win for the Bucks, and everybody's on cloud nine right now because everybody on the winning team gets an additional $515,000 in their pocket. That can go a long way for some players who are two-way contractors. And there was even something that mentioned that Giannis would help one of the players, the two-way players on the team, buy a house with that money. So it can really change the outlook for some people. But of course, for the stars of these teams, ain't really much to them. Not gonna lie. The Thunder lose the tournament, but they don't come away with nothing. All of their players get $206,000 from this tournament as well. So they don't completely miss out. But that caps off what was, I'll say, a pretty interesting slate of NBA Cup games over the course of the season. There were some high highs in it and some horrible lows for some teams. But at the end of the day, the Bucks reign victorious here. Of course, what matters more is an actual championship still. It doesn't look like anybody there, when I was watching the press conference, was treating it like, oh, we just won the NBA championship, like the fucking Lakers and shit were doing last season. And they had Malika Andrews doing the damn post-game presser with the team. She desperately wanted the Lakers to be there, you could tell, but they had no fucking chance. They just sucked, dude. Anyways, that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I will have to look at what would be an optimal time to really go in depth in terms of team progress this season so far. I know the Christmas Day games are coming up, so there could be something there with just a little bit of time. Peace.